The bliss of the abyss, it's here now.
Welcome back to the Bliss of the Abyss. This week on the show, I have Vera. That's all I'm going to tell you about who this person is. They spoke to me on my insistence under a pseudonym, and I won't go into how I know them or who they are, apart from the fact that they are currently living in Russia. And I wanted to get the perspective of someone who is liberal, anti-fascist, but living in an increasingly autocratic, nightmarish dystopia, and what it's like. So hopefully this is a narrative that gets out there a bit more, and gives people a bit of a different perspective on everything that's going on in this complicated, horrific war. Recorded this a few days ago, so a few things have changed since then. Obviously, this is a very fast escalating situation. Things are changing left and right, and there was some, I don't know if positive is probably too strong a word, but some good news on some peace talks today, and descaling, is that a word? Scaling back of military operations. Apparently, now obviously there's been a lot of bad faith and lies in this war so far, so we can but hope that that is true. Anyway, I'm rambling. This is a really, really interesting chat, and we talk about all kinds of things. Vera did want to also mention that she is increasingly seeing the letter Z everywhere. Everywhere. And I don't think I need to spell out why that is a worry. But this was a really interesting conversation, so let's just jump straight to it. So let's start with that. Look at this. Look at this.
Very nice t-shirt.
Thank you very much. So hello, welcome on to the quote-unquote show. It's a show. That's right, we're not just talking. Although we are just talking, and we're going to talk about everything. Just to give people a bit of background who are listening, I've had on someone who is actually living in Ukraine right now. I've had on someone whose partner is going to the border. And now I'm having on someone who's actually living in Russia right now. And that will be you.
Hello.
Hello. And this is really just to get some perspective that perhaps people don't get to hear, because I know in your country you're getting fed a lot of disinformation, and I'm sure a lot of people here are getting fed disinformation as well. I know I saw a post today on my Facebook that I immediately know is bullshit that I want to talk to you about, but let's start with the basics. Firstly, thanks for coming on the show, because it's a crazy time to be in Russia and to talk freely about any of these topics. So
thank you for having me, because it's a rare opportunity to speak one's mind without fear.
Yeah, well, yes, hopefully there will be zero repercussions, because I would take it as my fault if anything happens. So
no, I am here at my own free will, and I take full responsibility for everything I say. Okay,
cool. So let's start off with the topic of free speech then, because that is obviously something that's under attack in Russia. I'm going to obviously come at it from my perspective. So if I get stuff wrong, please correct me, or if I get something slightly wrong or I over exaggerate, then that's just because I've read something, misinterpreted it, or whatever it is. But as far as I can tell, any effective mainstream opposition to the war, even calling it a war, has basically been erased in Russia.
True.
Is that true?
Absolutely true.
That's true. So if I was in St. Petersburg and I went down the street waving a flag saying no war, free Ukraine, what would happen to me?
You would get arrested almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
you would either get a hefty fine, about 15 to 30,000 rubles, which is about
10p.
Jesus.
Sorry.
Yeah. He's being very generous. And you might also get arrested for, I think that the maximum charge right now is 15 years in prison,
Right.
because your actions would equal treason.
Right. And what is it? Is it all of my actions? What's the most illegal thing that I'm doing there? Is it calling it a war? Is it protesting?
All of the above,
all of
I'm
the
afraid.
above. Right. So I can't do any, because there was one thing that went viral here of an old lady with a little sign up, and then she's like surrounded by men in riot gear.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There have been peaceful protests all over the country since the first day of this nightmare, and every single one of them has met the same fate. People arrested, people tortured, people fined, people in prison, and we even had a story about a lady who had an anti-war poster in her window in her apartment building, and she got fined for 30K.
For a poster, for a piece of paper in the window.
Because if you call the special operation a war, you're officially against the government. And if you are against the government in a time, the thing is, you cannot call it a war, but they've set on all of the rules of war censorship. You may ask, where is the logic in that? And I will tell you, this is Russia. We have no logic. We have Putin. It makes no sense. So you cannot call it a war, but all of the rules of media in the war are applying to our reality right now.
Right. You're living in a wartime reality, but you're not allowed to call it war. It's really, it's through the looking glass, isn't it? Type of normalization. So. Yeah. I think like over in the West, probably people looked to Russia and thought, well, this happens to Navalny, or, you know, this happens to big actors. And I think he just got sentenced today. It's the 23rd of March to 9 more years in prison.
Yes.
So I think I've heard some historians say basically he's in prison until Putin's dead, regardless of what he does or says. So I think we've seen that over the years and kind of not accepted it because it's horrific, but come to expect it. But the ramping up against everyday folk of these same kinds of things, I think comes as more of a surprise, and it must feel somewhat chilling. Do you feel it in a day-to-day? Is there something in the air that feels different in terms of your normal life? Obviously, I want to talk about like work and closures and stuff like that, so we can get onto that as well.
Yeah, well, 100%. It feels like the beginning of a horror film, like closer to the end of the first quarter of a horror movie, where life still seems to go on normal, but there are little details that change and leave a very eerie feeling, unsettling, I'd say. On days of protests, there is an enormous amount of police everywhere, and you can get checked just by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Even if you're wearing the colors of the flag of Ukraine, you can get stopped and your documents checked and maybe even arrested, because it might also be seen as, you know, a form of protest. A lot of shops have closed. A lot of businesses have, some have officially left Russia. Most of them have just temporarily stopped business here. And a lot of it is deeply political, but also a lot of it has to do with immense logistical problems, because with the closure of European skies all around Russia, and with the drastic fall of the ruble, business is suffering a lot. And I know that people all over the world can already feel it. You know, you wouldn't think that we were such a huge part of a global community, but we're all connected. Like my mom has been living in Spain since September, and she says, like, she lives in a smallish town It's not central. It's very peaceful. It's somewhat rural. They don't have any sunflower oil. And they haven't had any for about 2 weeks because Russia and the Ukraine are main exporters of sunflower oil. And obviously that is halted right now. A lot of people haven't really lost their jobs yet because it seems like a lot of the businesses are just waiting to see what happens. Because obviously closing huge chains like McDonald's, like Zara, like all of the shops under the Estee Lauder umbrella, like Joe Malone, like, thousands of them, would leave tens of thousands of people jobless, unemployed, and prices are already rising for everything. Like in the most ridiculous ways. Like, for instance, you cannot buy sugar anywhere. And it's so strange. It's such a random thing to suddenly go missing. It really reminds us of the beginning of the pandemic where everyone was panic buying like toilet paper
and pasta and all those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in the end, that was unnecessary.
Right.
The same thing is happening now. It's more panic than an actual problem. But for example, feminine hygiene products. All of the companies that produce them, that bring them to Russia, have said that they are going to either minimize or stop doing that. And obviously, a lot of people went out and panic bought everything they could. And everything that remains costs almost 3 times the original price.
Jesus
3
Christ.
times. And with so many people being on hold in their jobs, you know, it's just impossible to buy something that is pretty damn necessary for, you know, even more than half of the population of this country every month. And funnily enough, on our like internet marketplaces, you can now find people reselling all of those objects for even more ludicrous prices. However, the main prognosis is that it's going to get a lot worse in April. And at the moment, everyone seems to be kind of semi-paralyzed because we don't really know what to expect. The pandemic kind of taught us not to really plan in advance. And what is happening right now
shortens the window even further, doesn't it?
It says, remember the pandemic? Wasn't it lovely? Such a peaceful, happy time. It was not.
Yeah.
But we had no idea what was coming. Yeah. Oh, haven't you heard? In Moscow, they have lifted all COVID restrictions.
Oh, yeah. That happened here as well. Yeah.
Isn't that lovely? Because clearly COVID just said, ooh, Russia. Oh, I'm going to leave now.
I'm done. See you later.
I spoke to my grandmother yesterday and she was like, yeah. I watch the news. I see what's happening in China. There's a new type of COVID over there. I think it's called stealth or something like that. She said, yeah. You just wait until it comes here. We'll all be wearing masks again, I'm sure. Oh. And somehow that sounds like good news.
Actually, that brings up an interesting point. I mean, you said a lot there that was sort of fascinating. I wonder, one of the things that immediately jumped to mind is how I would feel if I went to the market and I saw some shiesty bastard charging double price for something that they've bought, like essentially an essential, like a feminine hygiene product. I want to fucking slap that person in the face. I'm sure there must be a lot of resentment brewing around stuff like that. But an interesting thing you brought up there, which definitely is a narrative here that I want to get your take on, is that the war is supported in a large part by the older generation because they watch TV. That's how they get their information. And now the only information you can get from TV, doesn't even say the word war, is special military operation. So are you seeing a divide even more between the old and the young? Is this a true narrative? Am I missing some areas of gray here?
That is very true. But an important thing to remember is that Russia is literally the biggest country in the world.
Yeah.
And that most of it is rural.
Yeah.
And most of the people in this country are not middle class and not even lower middle class.
Right.
And they live in conditions which would seem so bizarre, you know, in 21st century.
Yeah.
So Moscow, St. Pete, and a few other bigger towns generally live a very different life from like 90% of the country. And that majority of people only have like one TV set per, you know, I don't know, a couple of houses,
Right.
and only a few channels that they can catch on their antenna. And these are government channels. And those people have never traveled and don't want to travel. They have never even seen a dollar in their life. They don't give a damn about anything that's happening outside of their village. And for them, Putin is an absolute hero because they don't have any information that would prove otherwise. And they usually think that the Muscovites, the St. Petersburg people who come out to protest, are just spoiled brats. And I mean, to some extent, that is correct, but only because we have traveled and we have seen life around the globe, and we know that what's happening in Russia is not good and is not healthy, and is in no way is it democratic,
No,
or even humane, to be
No.
honest. So us demanding a better life is seen as something, you know, unnecessary. If we speak about the generational rift, definitely 1,000,000%. However, I think that the scary thing is there are a lot of people my age, I'm 31, who think that what's happening is, you know, logical and good and for the great of this country.
really.
Yeah.
So these are the people I'm most interested in, because that sort of rural-urban divide that gave us Brexit, that gives us Trump, that explains a lot of things in a lot of countries.
Yeah.
But sort of the young, more clued up people who are able to read and do their own research and can see way more verifiable things. How are they saying that it's? I mean, I wonder what narratives they use and if I've heard any of them.
To be fair, they usually come from very pro-Putin families.
Okay.
And quite often they are children of people who work for the government.
Right.
They're usually upper middle class or high class. Honestly, I think that to some extent it might be survival instinct, because it seems like this country is very quickly rolling to a position where you're either passionately pro-Putin, or you are either not here or you are in jail. And it's a curious thing that all of these Western sanctions have actually pushed a lot of people who don't even support what's happening. You see, there are a lot of things happening at the same time. Like, we have the actual situation in the Ukraine, which is beyond terrifying.
Yeah.
We have everyday life in Russia, which is changing by the hour. We have all of these sanctions flying at us. And for a lot of people, the viciousness and the amount of the sanctions have actually pushed them to be more pro-Russia, even if they haven't been before. Because it does seem disproportionate, it does seem cruel, and it does seem pretty, what's the word? Yeah, I had a good word. I'm not gonna remember it now. The thing is, surely Russia is not the first country in the history of the world to do what is being done right now. But it seems like we are the only ones getting such severe punishment. And it's not Putin who is suffering.
Right, of course not.
It's all of us.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, unfortunately, not most of us, but a lot of us are 100% against what is happening.
Yeah.
And the thing is, for example, most of the people my age in the creative industry freelance. And most of our freelance gigs come from the West, because most of us are well educated, we know several languages, And we have traveled and we have dreams of maybe of relocating one day or traveling and working.
Yeah.
And we have a very good, healthy relationship with the West.
Yeah.
And the way that we would get our income was through PayPal. PayPal was one of the first companies to leave Russia. So that just cuts out funding for so many fantastic organizations who are fighting against the regime, funding for LGBTQ plus organizations, which, as you know, are against the law.
And they're already under attack immensely in Russia already.
Exactly. And when Visa and MasterCard cut off all of the service of the Russian cards abroad, can you imagine? You flee the country.
Yeah.
In panic, in fear, in hope to save whatever dignity you might have, to save whatever income you might have. And you are in a strange place and you're trying to settle, and there are thousands of people exactly like you. And there are people from the Ukraine who are seeking shelter, and it's just a chaotic mess.
Yeah.
And your rubles are already losing their value by the minute.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you get completely cut off from all of your money.
Yeah.
How is that a logical sanction against Russia? How?
It just seems, you know what it is? It's hitting a nail with a hammer this big. So
very true.
It's an unfortunate way of doing things, because I guess from PayPal's point of view, they're just like, well, partly it's woke capitalism. It's like, we don't support this, but also it's partly like, it's easier for them to just say, well, instead of reviewing case by case, we're just going to go, vroom.
Yep.
But then, like you say, what it does is actually it polarizes people further, and it pushes some people who might have been, a bit in the middle, and now suddenly they're veering against what they would have naturally done. And so, it pushes it, like you say, you're sliding towards, in one way, going closer to North Korea, and another way, just completely losing all of the vibrant or artistic or otherwise different creative people from Russia, and making it more grey, which is a scary, scary thing.
And it seems like, pardon my modern language, but it seems like Russia is basically being canceled right now.
Mm-hmm.
And even those of us who are completely against the regime, and maybe those of us who have even been punished for being anti-Putin, are going to suffer just the same. Like, I know stories of my friends who have fled, and they can't find a place to live because people are just like, you're Russian, go away.
Right.
And I understand where that is coming from, but it's horrifying.
It's so wrong-headed. It's the conflation of government with population, which is just like, that's just a basic fact that they're not the same thing. I remember feeling like a certain amount of like despair and then guilt about Brexit, because I was like, well, I've got a British passport. So then people find out I'm British, they're like, oh yeah, Brexit, eh? And then when I was in Italy recently, we have to go through a different thing. And you did get the feeling of like, you saw like all the Europeans who are part of the club, they had a cafe, they're drinking wine, and the Brits, it's like, we're packed in this little thing and there's nothing. And they're like, well, you voted for this, didn't you, you fuckers? I'm like, I just want to say, no, I didn't. But it's like you say, it's like, it's disproportionate punishment. Like, and there's some element of whitewashing going on here in the West. Like, there was this article the other day of like Johnson meeting with the rulers of Qatar and being like, well, we're getting ourselves off of Russian oil. And it's like, and what is this country that you've decided are morally clean now? And who are we supplying arms to by the tens of millions is Saudi Arabia. To do what? Oh, that's right. Continue bombing Yemen. And how many sanctions are we enforcing on them for doing that? So why is that? Like, is it because Why is it because of, do you think this is in some way retaliation for 2016, for the whole Trump-Putin thing? Is it because Russia is European, or at least, the big cities? Do you think, what's the reason that you think that there's this sort of massive reaction to this war, as opposed to some other wars, which, like you say, seem to just sort of carry on?
Before I go into that, I remembered the word. The word is hypocrisy.
Yes.
Honestly, I do not have an expert opinion, and there are a lot of thoughts and ideas flying all over the place. But it does seem as if the world was just waiting for a chance to rip Russia apart. And my grandfather used to work for the KGB. He was a Soviet spy in the Cold War era. So as you can imagine, he has a lot of opinions about what's happening. But he's more pro-Putin than you would expect.
Right.
Putin is also, by the way, from the KGB.
Yeah, that's where he started, didn't he? Yeah.
So he says that everyone has always hated Russia, and they were just waiting for a moment to bite our head off. And it comes as no surprise. We never had any friends, blah, 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 da, da, da.
So basically saying Russophobia. But I mean, can it be?
But does that seem plausible to you? Like, obviously there has always been some tension,
right?
But it doesn't seem to justify the extent of what's happening right now.
That's like the American argument of like, they hate us for our freedom. It's like, is it really that simple? That seems overly simple.
And what freedoms do you have, Americans?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so okay, right. So there's an element of thinking of that, but like we both seem to think that's overly simplistic, even if I'm sure there are some people who are like, for some reason, I hate Russia, blah, blah, blah. But for most people, you don't just tend to hate a whole country.
Seems to be a fashionable thing to do in business as well. Like, I'll give you an example. My partner has had a very successful marketing company in Moscow for over 10 years. And most of their clients were foreign companies who came into Russia and wanted to, either rebrand or learn how to cater to a Russian audience. And so the company was very successful. So basically, over the course of 3 days, they have lost 80% of their clients because they just said, we cannot in any way, shape, or form have any connection to Russia right now.
Right. But in marketing, especially, a lot of image, isn't it? It's like we can't begin to associate that kind of mentality.
Exactly. So what they're doing now is they're relocating the company to a smaller country in the European Union. Even though it's not in any way the center of the world, but it's the EU. And it doesn't have the same reputation as Mother Russia does right now. There are a lot of people, especially those who watch the news, who claim that this was the only right decision. And if we didn't attack first, we would have been attacked. And I'm like, by whom?
Yeah.
Who and why would attack? Like, for what?
I don't know. I've seen that narrative as well. As far as I can tell, the two main stories I've heard as to what that was going to be was in the Donbass, some kind of attack on ethnic Russians or using biological weapons. I haven't even read anyone saying that they were going to try and take Crimea back. That's not even been a narrative here, but those contested regions in the east, that's what I've heard pro-Russian arguments say. It's like they were about to attack us, so we attacked them, or didn't attack them. We're liberating them.
I believe that the main story being fed to people is that the evil empire of the US of A has been slowly crawling closer and closer to Russian border to start vicious, never before seen attacks on innocent Russian people. And obviously Ukraine is like the sweetest piece of the pie for the states. Why? No one knows, but never mind. And NATO have been slowly bringing their soldiers closer to the Russian border. Why? No one knows. For a sneak attack for no particular purpose. And the biggest narrative right now is bio laboratories. That the states and NATO have like tens of biological labs all over the Ukraine, which are working on a special virus transmitted by birds to specifically target
Russian
people of
DNA.
Slavic origin.
Yes. I've seen this as well. Now, does it not come up that there are millions of people in Ukraine with that same DNA, and how would it not also hurt them, so it wouldn't work as a biological weapon?
Well, apparently they're very smart birds. I don't even know. And China on the other side of this this ridiculousness is going, well, you know what? Let's not talk about laboratories, shall we? There are people who claim that what happened in Wuhan with COVID was also started by American biolabs, and it was initially only supposed to target Russia, but somehow it escaped, and it was a military mistake and all of that. The thing about propaganda, there's one rule. No, there are two rules that always work. The first rule, it has to be very emotional.
Yeah.
And the second rule, the more ridiculous the theory, the better it works.
Right. I think I've seen this with the one of the literally stated aims of that Putin said, which was to denazify Ukraine. And this was actually one of the things I wanted to show you, because I saw this on my newsfeed today, which is purportedly, obviously ridiculous, apart from the fact that Zelensky's Jewish, and of course there are Nazis in Russia. It's also, like you said, it's emotional. So it's like, well, we the Russian people are the reason that World War II was defeated. We lost the most soldiers and we got rid of the Nazis, which is true. And so if you say we'll denazify Ukraine and you tell people there are Nazis in charge there, yes, there we go. It hits on those emotional points. So he can see this. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to give him the airtime. Yeah. But as he says, there's a picture here of some soldiers, who knows what they are, but they're holding a Ukrainian flag with a swastika in the middle. And it says, "So like this, my dear friends, when you write on the internet, pray for Ukraine, you're in fact inviting us to pray for this. This is the Ukraine that Donbass has been fighting since 2014. So Ukraine has been since 2014. Years to date, she's killed over 15,000 Russian civilians, burned alive Russians, neo-Nazi squad Azov, whose members during 2014 years in Odessa, soldier with over 80 Russians burned alive in flames, death to the Moskalis, etc., etc., etc. Talks about being sheep, etc.
The thing is,
look, 55,000 shares and growing.
Yeah. The thing is, you have to realize that, as my grandfather says, World War III has already started. It's been going on for a while, and it's a war in information. There are such a lot of fakes from both sides flying all over the place.
Yeah.
There is a channel on Telegram, which seems to be the safest form of channel of communication in Russia right now.
Yeah.
Which is called Anti-Fake. And some of their material is clearly quite pro-government, but some of it is pretty realistic. Like sometimes in Western news, they used footage claiming something, and that you find out that it's footage from a video game.
Yep, I've seen that.
Or from a different war, or from a movie even. So I think that you have to not even triple check, not even quadruple check everything that you see, and find sources for everything, as exhausting as that sounds.
Yeah.
I think there is an element of truth to this particular post.
Yeah.
The extent of that truth, I have no idea.
Right.
But I definitely know that Azov is in fact a dangerous organization.
Yeah.
And there has been a lot of provocation on the territory of Ukraine. Does it justify what's happening right now? I don't think so. I don't think anything can justify what's happening there right now.
No.
You know, I have friends there, and I have listened to your episode when you know, spoke to our friend, and it's just, we at school, we are always taught everything about World War II, or as we call it in Russia, the Great Patriotic War, in such detail. The 9th of May, which is Victory Day, is such a huge deal every year in Russia.
Yeah, I've been there.
And how can we possibly, it's the thought that this can be happening in 2022 is paralyzing.
Yeah.
And so quickly, our lives have changed, you know, in a matter of weeks. I mean, even less, actually.
I think it's a month tomorrow that this began.
Yeah.
And yeah, everything, the world, it feels incredibly different. So much so that there is literally almost record numbers again of a pandemic, like we said, happening in this country right now. And it just doesn't, you know.
No one seems to care, right?
No one seems to
I'm sorry, I have a personal with Johnson, because
good, me too. Let's hear yours.
All of the scandal, all of the trouble with him partying in the middle of a pandemic, where other people will get fined for it, and he was just fine with it.
Yep.
And all of that, and the rise of disapproval of his actions, and he is one of those people with the loudest bark against Russia. Have you noticed?
Yep.
Despite the passion, the everything. I think that what's happening with the oligarchs right now, they sort of had it coming, but to deny the impact that Russia has on the health of your economy to such an extent is just stupid.
What do you think is going to happen? What do you think? How do you think? Do you think Russia takes Kharkiv, let's say, Mariupol, and then ceasefire, and then we draw a new border? Do you think they withdraw? I don't see how that happens. Do you think nuclear weapons? What do you think? I know it's just speculation, but I just feel like you'll probably have a different perspective given where you are right now.
I have to say that I try really hard not to build any theories, because it just makes it impossible to breathe, to be honest. If you really sit down and calculate all of the outcomes, a nuclear war doesn't seem like the worst thing that might happen, because at least death will be immediate. It'll be immediate death. I spoke to a friend yesterday. Her husband is Ukrainian. He has relatives there. And she has always been quite pessimistic about the politics and the course of this country, but now it's just beyond pessimistic. I also have friends who, I mean, all of it is still, it's very much a panic response, because the circumstances we're in are extraordinary. Some people rejoice. They're like, we are going to rebuild culture and business, and we're not going to depend on the West anymore. And it's going to open up so many doors, and it's going to give us such a chance to thrive. And you're like, you do realize that the reason why you haven't been thriving is because of the actions of our government. No one in the West has been really stopping us. Like Russian, for example, Russian fast food has not been thriving, not because of McDonald's.
Right.
McDonald's is not the one that's been stifling you.
No.
McDonald's have a fantastic business model,
right,
which makes it the most successful fast food franchise in the world. And the reason why they can keep their prices so incredibly low is because of that very smart, very good working model of business. You haven't been able to do anything like this, Russia, because our laws just don't.
What about Star Dogs?
What about Star Dogs? There are hardly any left. Also, it's not really good food, is it?
No. The best thing about Star Dogs is if you read it the way it looks in English, it looks like crap dogs, and that is what it was.
They had one good thing called the roulette, which is when you have a sausage like rolled into like what's it called? It was surrounded by, it was like, it was
Like
like a roll, and
like
it
a
had
corn dog?
mash around it. No, not like a corn dog. It was almost like a shawarma,
Oh, okay, like
but with a wrap. That's the word I was looking
Mm.
for. Wrap. Sorry, stress response of my translator brain. I'm like, what is English? Maybe I'll get fined for using English next week. I honestly don't know. We really seem to be rolling down the hill of oppressions.
Yeah,
we really are.
I mean, and is there any government support for people who've lost? Is that a ridiculous question? Of course there isn't. If you've lost your job, if you've lost income, so you just
Well, no one has officially lost anything yet because everything is on hold.
right.
Like no company has officially said we're leaving Russia forever. Y'all are fired.
Right.
Everyone just said we are suspending operations for the moment. Like when IKEA announced that it's closing, temporarily closing.
Yeah.
I must admit, I was one of those people in one of those huge lines to get in. I'll tell you why. Because I take care of my grandma. Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's one of the reasons why I haven't left, because if I leave, she's here by herself, and that would be horrible. So, and my grandma loves a few of the foods you can only get at IKEA. And I just knew that life is not going to get any easier in the next couple of months. And if I surprise her with a pack of her favorite cookies, it's going to make life a little bit nicer for her. So that's why I stood in that line for an hour and a half. But I got a chance to speak to one of the employees at IKEA, and she said, they're keeping all of our salaries.
Mm-hmm.
They're even paying us a little bit extra, and they're giving us something to do still, even if we're not selling anything. And they say this is until May.
Right.
And that seems to be the narrative for a lot of these companies. That we're waiting until May. So let's see what happens then.
Yeah, because as soon as people start to not have any income at all, and they're not allowed to complain about it because that gets them thrown in jail, that starts to become a much, much more tense situation, even than the incredibly tense situation that you say is happening right now. So IKEA behind the scenes think that by May this will all be over with, I suppose.
Or at least that the ruble will stabilize and they will be able to print out new prices for everything and figure out logistics. Maybe the skies will be opened again.
Mm.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously I don't want this to continue any more at all. But like you said, it's I don't want to sort of project into the future, but I kind of can't help it. That's what my brain does. It's like comes up with, and I don't see an outcome that, because as far as I can tell, this is Putin's war. Like, you look at other wars and there are lots of different pieces moving. Why did that happen? And you trace it all around. I can't trace this past him, really.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like this man at the end of a long table had this idea and became obsessed with it.
Yeah.
But because of that, because of knowing what he's like, I can't see him just withdrawing and just saying, okay, you know what, maybe this was a ridiculous idea. That's not going to happen.
You know, most of the people who are on the same page with me regarding the whole situation really believe that he is insane.
Yeah.
He does not look like a healthy person. He does not act like a healthy person. There has been a rumor going around that in the last 2 weeks, he fired almost 1,000 people who used to work with him. Like, you know, chefs and maids and secretaries and whatnot. Why do you think he would do something like that?
Fear of being poisoned? Yeah, paranoia. Because the longer this goes on, and if it becomes less popular and less popular, the more the paranoia is going to ramp up. And I mean, he's got his finger on the button, right? That's his button to press if he wants to. No one else has that, do they? I know how the system works in America and in the UK. I don't know how it works over there.
I'm pretty sure everything is in the hands of one insane Botoxed man.
And what did you think about that rally? What is that? Is that just complete lie, or is that? It's
100%. It's completely staged. It's a complete lie. People were paid to be there, and there was even an article about a person who is very pro-government who wanted to go there to like see the gig and cheer and wave the flag, and they were not let in. They were not let in. Like, you couldn't buy tickets, you couldn't anything. It's supposed to be like this celebration all over the country because Crimea is finally ours. Yes, we got back what is truly has always been ours, and we're reconnected. But somehow only a select few who were paid very little to be there got to celebrate. And I don't know if you've seen this, but there has been a photo going around of a garbage bin outside of the venue, which is full of Russian flags.
No, I have not seen that. That sounds like...
I'll send it to you. That people were given when entering to wave around and patriotically scream their heads off, and then after the show, they just didn't need them anymore.
Right, job done. Flag in the bin.
Also, there has been a lot of speculation whether or not Putin actually attended it, because there is footage of him being there. But have you seen that thing with him and the microphone where it's clearly green screen?
No.
Send that to you too.
Oh my God.
And apparently he hasn't left the bunker for a very long time. He hasn't, he hasn't stood up from the table. Sorry, it's ridiculous. Like, you watch Austin Powers and you think, surely, what a caricature. And then you live in Russia.
I know.
Like, oh, it's a documentary. Okay.
Well, I heard this thing, Oliver Stone sat down and did these interviews with Putin. And apparently one of the things they did is they watched Dr. Strangelove. And Putin hadn't seen it before. And apparently he was like really taken with it. He thought it was very interesting. Not funny, but interesting.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. AKA the most terrifying word in the world.
The one thing that I'd seen that I know is photoshopped or whatever, video manipulation, is the one with him where he's got like these air hostesses and female staff behind him, just to show like, he's like, oh, look, he's popular, he's a man of the people. And it's like, yeah, but you can see when they pass across things that the green screen is there and they were never there. So I didn't realize at the rally though. That's it.
As I said, speculation. Because it would seem strange to be hiding for such a long time and then to come out to such a public event, because he must understand the hate he's surrounded with right now.
Yeah, surely. I wonder how much of it gets to him. I mean, well,
the general consensus amongst us thinking young people is that he's completely delusional. He lives in an absolute bubble, and just the slightest whiff of you being at least a little bit unsure of him, at least, like a drop of doubt, and it's off with your head.
It's a Stalin level paranoia. Erase you from the photograph.
Seems like it. Seems like it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's one of those things that actually, like, we're not going to find out for however long, but it would be more terrifying. Let's say 50 years in the future, you find out it's actually no, that was just him being him. It was, because like I visited this place in the UK called the Chislehurst Caves, where up to 15,000 people sheltered in World War II. It's this huge underground complex. They set up this whole society, and as part of the thing there, they had these posters there from front pages during the war. And one of them was Hitler dead. They found out he's dead. The person who's second in charge, I think Admiral Dönitz, something like that, takes charge, and he gives this speech being like, we must stop the Anglo-Americans bringing Bolshevism to Europe, and our glorious leader died fighting to his last breath. And, the journalists are reporting it. They have no idea that he's committed suicide. They have no idea how he's died. It's all just... But then, obviously, you in hindsight, you're like, oh, okay, so there's this complete crazy loon locked in a bunker for months and finally kills himself, his dog, his partner, all of the rest of it. But you only find out however much later. And the fact that he was on all these substances and all of that. And that's one of the rumors that's been going on in the West. I don't know if it's made it to, or if it maybe even started there, is that Putin's on a load of steroids. That's what's going on. Yeah, it's been said actually in Parliament in this country. That,
what?
Yeah.
Like, why would you be on steroids? For
Lord
what?
Owen. Well, you know, he's a hard man, right? He's a black belt in judo, although they took it away, but I mean, he still is. And he's obviously, you know, into, here we go, look. Putin addicted to steroids, claims Lord Owen. Very dangerous.
Who is Lord Owen?
So one of the, he's in the House of Lords, and he's a doctor. So before he became a lord, he was a doctor. So he can say, look, I think his immunity is compromised.
Well, the truth is that we know very little about Putin.
That is the truth, isn't it? The more we find out, the less we know.
Sadly so.
Yeah, and like you said, the oligarchs have had this coming, right? For sure. They've been milking the Russian people and taking all of those rubles and putting them very conveniently in London property and stuff like that.
Well, some of them have, but I don't think that, again, it's the question of the hammer and nail, like Abramovich, for instance. I don't think, I mean, honestly, I don't have enough information, but it doesn't seem like he's the ultimate bad guy. He has been living in the UK for such a long time, and he has been doing so much for UK economy. I don't think he has had any associations with Russia for a pretty long time, apart from being there. So, you know, I don't know. It just...
they actually, weirdly with Abramovich, is they actually revoked his visa about 2 years ago. So he's not been living in the UK. He's been living in Israel. He got Israeli citizenship.
Oh, that's very interesting. I wonder why.
It was unclear why, because this was before the conflict, before even the amassing of troops or anything. So, but he still owned all his UK property. He still owned Chelsea and all of that stuff. But they took away his visa, and no one's ever really said why. But like you said, he was one of the people who got sanctioned pretty early on, one of the oligarchs, and then they've seized all his assets, and they've seized Chelsea. And Chelsea are in a very strange position. I don't know. You don't particularly care about football, but it's a very weird situation for the people who work there, who are like, they're not able to offer them contracts. They're not able to pay for flights. They're not able to, they've got a certain amount of security they're allowed to pay. It's a very, very strange situation to find yourself in. And I guess it's comparable in a way to what you're saying about like feminine hygiene products. It's like you hit these things with this massive hammer, and the shock waves, suddenly it's like you're a steward at Chelsea and you're not getting paid or something. It's like, it's such a butterfly effect of different things that ripple out. And I think, to your point you were saying earlier about like people being like, oh, it's going to open up all these new opportunities for us, for Russia, we can do it ourselves. It's like, but the world works far less well if every country is isolated and has to do everything by itself. Like, that's just a simple, obvious. Think about like, unless your country spans all the climates, it's like, well, then how are you going to get coconuts? You know, you're not, right? So you better hope you've got some kind of trading partner so you can get coconuts. Is just one example, but you know, the point stretches. Yeah, sorry, I'm rambling.
No, it's not about forcing people to be patriotic and putting all of their talents into their country. It's about giving people the freedom to choose. You know, you mentioned football, and I have a desire to slightly segue into the arts right now, because it's you know, something I know a lot about, working in the arts. So the thing is, a lot of big names have fled the country.
Right.
Even those who used to be very pro-government. You kind of had to be if you wanted to get any sort of government funding, and without government funding, it's pretty much impossible to function at a high level in this country.
Right.
And here's the thing. You've probably heard that Meta, who are Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, has been officially labeled an extremist organization in Russia.
Yeah, so
so WhatsApp is untouched because Putin clearly still wants to, I don't know, text his kids or something. But on Instagram and Facebook, we can still use them.
Right.
But it basically means that if the police want to get something on you, They can just say, aha, using extremist apps, I see. But the thing is, Facebook and especially Instagram has been the main place for advertising for the art sector, which is not government funded, because that's where everyone was, that's where the money was, the ads were affordable and very, effective. Like all of the shows I have been a part of, I've been directing or acting or taking part in, most of our ads, most of our people came to us from Instagram. So now that has been completely cut off. And then you have a question of where to advertise, because people are scattered all over the place. And Instagram obviously has its downsides, but overall it was a very, very convenient place, to work. And then you question if you even have the moral right to put on a show right now. And a lot of people have been completely paralyzed, because how can you give ads when there's a terrifying war going on,
Right. Yeah. And you can't even do those things that, like, so over here, like a lot of, theatre productions or comedy productions are doing, like, our proceeds, some of our proceeds will go to, but obviously that is not an avenue that you can do in Russia. You can't put on a gig and send money to Ukraine for it. That's a sure way of getting yourself in a lot of trouble.
Into jail, directly into jail. So what we do is we donate to Red Cross, because they are strictly non-political, but we all know who they're helping, and they're helping those who need it the most. So
right.
But maybe Red Cross is going to be against the law tomorrow. We don't know. But while we can, we donate. And people go into the arts and don't really expect a lot of money, right? The arts is hardly ever a sector where you can easily get rich.
You don't, that's not usually the reason people get involved, is it?
Exactly. It's always been hard, and it always demands a lot of heart and patience and courage and hard work. And now it's even more turmoil than before. And the most heartbreaking thing is that we just started, kind of lifting our heads after COVID.
Yeah.
Things just started to look up at least a little bit. And we got hit with something we never even expected.
Because some of my favorite art, and art in the most broad sense, but if I narrow into like writing and theatre, novels, stuff like poetry, comes from Russia. And some of the stuff I've seen in my various trips to Russia in terms of like theatre or live shows or stuff like that has been incredible and dynamic and edgy, boundary pushing. Have you seen any like censoring of that kind of edge? I mean, you said like some leading people have fled, so who comes in their place? Is it like, right, well, we'll do Chekhov, but we'll cut out these bits that seem to be a bit, is anything like that happening?
Well, we just had news a couple of days ago then that in one of the government theaters, they were supposed to have a premiere of White Guard by Bulgakov, which is about the revolution, which happened almost exactly 100 years ago. And part of it is set in Kiev. And it has a lot of the same topics and questions that are happening right now. It's so scary how history completely repeats itself. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. And so that premiere was canceled.
Really?
And I think that's only the beginning. Yeah.
Right. So
which is why I think it's more important than ever to create revolutionary theater that gives people like me a voice.
God. So it's too subversive. A play that was written over 100 years ago is too subversive to be put on.
It's subversive to even stand on the street with a little scrap of paper that literally says 2 words.
Yeah.
The 2 words written on the paper are 2 and words, and that girl got arrested.
Really?
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
There are people who don't even have any words on their posters, just asterisks, like stars in place of the... So it clearly spells no to war. They get arrested. They get arrested and tortured and held there. Can you believe it?
See, that stifles all that creativity. That's, that, I mean, it will still happen, but you have to fight twice as hard to come up with ideas and think about ways to be creative and express yourself and put on shows. And in every way. It just becomes so much harder. It becomes, I'm sure, so a lot of people are just like, well, fuck this.
And so many people, I'm very lucky to have a lot of foreign friends who, ask me how things are. And they keep saying, leave, just come live with us. Da, da, da. And it's very generous and it's very kind, but it's completely impossible because without a chance to work, without a chance, the opportunity to open a bank account, what kind of life would it be? Yeah,
it's also, it's like an overly simplistic thing. It's it's like, just leave, there we go, problem solved. It's like, would that it was that simple, but it most certainly is not.
Like a friend of mine said this thing, like, can you imagine, like, let's say there's a Russian girl in her mid-20s who, let's say, is supporting her mom, her single mom, is working several jobs. Like, let's say she's a freelance designer. So one day she has a job, the other day she doesn't have a job. She is hardworking. She saves money. She hasn't been abroad in years because she's trying to save to like buy an apartment, which is very hard to do in Russia. And she's just working day in, day out. Then the pandemic hits and it's really hard on everyone, but she manages to still like keep her job and keep working and in the middle of all of that, all of a sudden now she is also an enemy of the world and she is to blame for something that she has absolutely no impact on. That's the thing that people don't understand, that the political system in Russia is completely corrupt and broken. And sadly, the history of this country shows us very clearly that protests don't work. It's just not an effective form of change in this country. It has never been. There are many historical reasons as to why, and it has a lot to do with mentality and the way our political system works, in brackets, works. But it's just, it never works. So people saying every single Russian that didn't go out on the street is to blame for everything that's happening. If you're not voicing that you're against it, you are pro it, and that's not true. That's just not true. They can arrest everyone, and it's not going to change anything because again, Russia is enormous, and the majority will still be supporting Putin. And they will just silence more, hot-headed Muscovites.
Right.
And people are going to say, good for Russia. They need to learn some discipline and learn to appreciate what they have. Putin has brought bread to our tables. Not really. In fact, he's taking it away.
Well, that's a powerful speech. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. It feels, it's a huge relief to be able to say all this out loud.
Yeah. Right. I can't even imagine. Just the idea that if you said that on the street corner, you'd be locked up. It's just... Well,
it depends on how I would say it and on which exact street corner.
Right.
But there's another lovely thing. So there are several websites where people can report other people for being anti-government. Can you imagine? It's like back to the USSR in the worst possible way. And there's a website which features big names in the arts who are government funded and who have openly spoken against the special operation, in brackets. And somehow, like, I'm in a band and we're a small band. We're a very small band. We're in no way, shape, or form government funded. There's hardly any money in what we do. We do it because we love it, Right. And the leader of our band is in that list. And it's terrifying.
So, and when you're in that list, is that basically like that's a light being shone on you, so that if they want to, they now have the context, the pretext to come in and say, you're on this list, you're an enemy of the state.
And do you know why she's on that list?
Why?
Because she published a post on Facebook saying, war is horrible, let there be peace.
Right, and that's subversive.
That's it.
Apparently, that's
it.
That's anti-Russia.
Yeah, that's anti-Russia.
Even though you're not at war, don't forget.
No.
But nevertheless. Fucking hell.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah.
Another friend of mine who works at the conservatoire in Moscow is also on that list. Do you know why? Because she posted on Facebook and on Instagram saying, I have friends in the Ukraine and I worry about their lives. I pray for peace. Anti-government propaganda.
So that's so insane though. Like talking about oligarchs before, like Abramovich has family in Ukraine. I happen to know this.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's the same for him. It's like, it must be the same. It's the same for tons of Russians.
Yeah.
Same for tons of Ukrainians the other way around. It's like,
yeah.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
I have to say that the relationship between the Ukrainian people and the Russians has been kind of strained for as long as I remember. I was in the Ukraine once. I went there on a little tour with a choir I was in when I was in music school. I was around 14, I think, 13, 14. And we went to Kiev and we went to Yalta and I fell in love with Kiev. It's such a beautiful, beautiful town. And the people were so lovely to us, but you could buy t-shirts and mugs and, baseball caps saying, thank God I'm not a Muscovite. And we were told like not to mention where we're from, even though it was pretty obvious.
Right.
Really? But all of us have friends in the Ukraine. A lot of us have relatives in the Ukraine. And it's just, what is happening right now is unimaginable.
I know. And I keep reading about it. I keep looking at videos and stuff just to remind myself that it's going on. And I can't tear my eyes away from it, to be honest. I'm worried for people like you, people like Feldman, people, the world, obviously, but people who I know who are on the ground there. It's just fucking hell, man. Yeah, like you said, we thought the last 2 years was shit. This is taking the piss now.
I keep thinking about that meme. I think it came out at the beginning of this year where it was like a little volcano and it says 2020. And above the volcano, a tsunami wave and it says 2021. And then behind the tsunami wave is Godzilla. And it says 2022. We're like, oh, no way, that's going to be true. Well, joke's on us.
I saw a meme today, which I want to show you. It's very funny. And it's kind of to do with that, and also how fucking almost sometimes it's easy to feel hopeless about all of this, because like you said, all of the disinformation and all of the different opinions, and just seems like, look, I'll show you it. It's this people in a boat. There's this guy saying, people, a hole in the floor.
It's created by a Russian artist. Yeah.
Really?
I saw the Russian version of it. Yeah.
I didn't know.
It's so accurate. It's exactly what's happening in Russia right now. 1,000,000%. A billion percent. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? I have so many friends whose livelihoods depended on TikTok and on Instagram. Yeah. And you might say, oh, bloggers, but it's the reality of our time. They gave ads there. I have a friend who had 1 million followers on TikTok. And now
TikTok cancelled in Russia.
The thing is, it came from TikTok itself. At the moment, you cannot post from Russia and you cannot see anything that was made in the outside world. So you can only scroll Russian videos.
Oh.
But apparently it's a temporary measure because I think they're implementing a new system of finding out if it's propaganda or not. Or I think there were a lot of very gruesome war videos being circulated, and they're just trying to build a bot that kind of stops them, I think.
Oh, interesting. So it literally is an echo chamber right now. It's all you can see is the most manicured feed possible.
Yeah. We have VPN, and God bless VPN, because we still have access to Instagram and Facebook and Western media. Like I have a fantastic friend who works for the BBC, and he has lived in Moscow for many, many years. As you know, BBC has been asked to leave Russia.
Yeah.
And he's a UK citizen, and he decided to stay here. And he said, I am going to do my job until I can't.
Really?
I'm gonna be here until they send me away.
And is he still reporting and
Yeah.
doing all of that stuff, but just sort of trying to keep quiet about it? Or, I mean, because
No,
just balls out.
Yeah.
Just balls out like that. What was her name? The presenter who made all the headlines for.
oh, she's not a presenter. She was an editor on the #1 news show on Channel 1, the most pro-Putin channel there is. Yeah, and she, I think you saw the video. She ran out in the middle of, live transmission, and yeah, it's so funny how so many people were like, it's not true. It's not true. People in Russia said, oh, it's Ukrainian propaganda. She was paid by the Ukrainians. And in Ukraine, everyone was saying it's just Russians trying to make it seem as if they're the good guys, and they're not the good guys.
I was hearing people talk today on a show about deep fakes, and that if this war had happened in 5 years' time, it would be so much worse, because technology, I'm sure you've seen them, but you can, most of the time you can kind of tell if it's a little bit off, but it's getting closer to the fact that, like, let's say the technology just came on in one massive leap, and suddenly you're watching a speech by, I don't know, Zelensky, and it's complete bollocks. It's just an actor, and they've just put his face on there, and they've got his voice, and it's just saying whatever they want it to say.
That already happened.
What?
There's a video like that. I hope it was just an example of what deepfakes can do. I'll try to find it for you, but there has been like a snippet of a video where it's not Zelensky.
Wait, really? Hold on, I see this. You've seen it, so hold on. If I search this, deepfake Zelensky surrender video, is it that?
Not sure. I think it might have been the.
So this is a deepfake video shared during a hack on Ukrainian television of Zelensky calling on citizens to surrender.
Maybe it is. I think maybe.
Let's see if this works.
The ongoing peace talks between Russia and Ukraine have opened the door for more viral misinformation to spread online. Now, this video falsely claims to show the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky appears to address Ukrainian citizens, telling them and encouraging them to lay down their arms and surrender to Russia. One version of the video has amassed more than 100,000 views on Twitter. But this is what is known as a deep fake video.
Okay,
it has been manipulated using artificial intelligence.
President I don't think they're going to show it.
Never says those words.
But yeah, that's the video. But I think it only appeared on Twitter. I don't think it was ever transmitted on an actual, TV channel.
But it's been out there, and people have seen it. I guess these things get taken down because this looks like it will actually show, because people find out it's fake, and then here we go.
Бути президентом виявилося не так вже й легко. Я змушений приймати складні рішення. Спочатку я вирішив повернути Донбас.
But you can tell, right? You can tell here.
There's something, it's what they call the uncanny valley.
Uncanny valley, 100%.
Right? You can, it's kind of off, but then again, we're looking at it right up close, and it does say manipulated images in the top left. So if you're like further away, let's say you're in a packed area, or the sound's down or something like that, and you just...
Yeah, and you're in a state of panic and fear, it's very, very easy to see this as being true.
The worst thing about this stuff is like people putting their time and effort into creating lies, fabrications.
You know what? It's a very, very curious thing. So in the last couple of months, Russia has been under a huge attack of fake phone calls. Like, what's the?
Oh,
There has to be an elegant English word of like when it's not thieves, but like
scams.
Scams. Yeah, that's the thing. Scam phone calls. Like you would get tens of them per day. And they would target like older people and would just try to get money out of you. And there have even been campaigns in in public transport telling you the basic safety rules of what to do if you get a scam call. And all of these calls have stopped almost immediately on the first day of the special operation.
Really?
Because apparently all of these centers were located in the Ukraine.
No way.
So there's clearly a lot of provocation coming from both sides.
Yeah. It's been, like you say, it didn't come out of nowhere.
No. And to be fair, Putin has been president since when?
I think he's over 20 years in power now.
Yeah. I remember still being at uni and I graduated. It's going to be 10 years since I graduated in the fall. I remember walking down the street. I think I was in my second year of uni and I was handed a leaflet which claimed that there is no such thing as Putin and that it's just a parade of doubles with like photos and proof and like 6 photos of Putin saying different ear shape, different eye shape, different hairline, different this, different that, different eye color. This is not the same person. And like on the back, it was some, weird little web link.
Right.
But now, every time we see him, he looks different. He looks like a wax figure of himself. And you can't help but think, was that random, weird smelling man on the street right all these years ago? I mean, we joke about it, but I would not be surprised if it was the actual truth.
So then, if you follow that conspiracy, who's controlling the puppet? What's the force behind it? That's
the world government, obviously. The reptiloids, obviously. Don't you know anything, UK man?
Should we call them the Jews? Should we just get it over and done with? Okay, so he's been in charge since 1999. Yeah.
No, fuck's sake.
And I think when they changed the laws recently, he's basically going to be in charge until 2036 because they amended the constitution.
Yeah, they did, so he could stay in power.
Yeah. So
no, I'm sorry, for the benefit of
the benefit of Russian freedom. So that would be another 14 years at least from now.
Do you think he'll live that long?
How old is he? I mean, depends how many steroids he's taken. He was born in 1952. So
he does not look good. He does not look good.
Huh.
I mean, to be fair, my grandma is 85 and she has more energy than I do, but I hope that's not the case with this man.
Yeah.
It's just
a
nightmare.
A nightmare. It's just such a nightmare.
But in a strange way, I also think it's, survival instinct, because I always have the option of laying down and feeling sorry for myself.
Right.
That will never be off the table. That is a path that's always open to me, but it's not going to change anything, right? It's not going to do anything. And I kind of feel like I'm staying in this country for as long as I can, because everything is here. Everyone is here. My life's work is here. And I don't want to go to a different country and be a nobody there when I can do so much good here. But also, I feel like this country will need people who are not pro-government, who are critically thinking, and who are artistic and, dare I say, elegant more than ever. Because someone has to keep the culture alive. Someone has to give the voiceless a voice. And I will do whatever it takes to keep my dignity, even if it means, sleeping in a cell block for 2 weeks. I can live with that, but I cannot live with where this country is going.
No, and you're right. It's like there has to be some resistance from within.
Yeah.
In the face of intense adversity. It's like it's worth preserving. And it doesn't have to be this way. But the more people who give up on it, the more likely it will just slide further and further.
So many brilliant, talented people have fled the country, and I completely understand them. But it's heartbreaking, as we said, history repeating itself, because almost exactly 100 years ago, from St. Pete, a huge ship with over 100 artists, singers, philosophers, actors, scientists has left. They fled the country to escape repressions. And the exact same thing is happening right now. Apparently, hundreds of thousands of people have left.
Really?
Apparently Berlin and a few, I think it's definitely Berlin and 2 other large German cities are overflowing with people. There is no more space, neither for Russians or refugees. Like I have a friend who has lived in Berlin for quite some time. She's Russian. And she said that it's been very difficult to find an apartment in Berlin like 5 years ago, but now it's impossible. It's impossible. Over 1 million people have arrived into Berlin in the last 2 weeks. 1 million people.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah. The main centers for Russians right now are, we don't have a lot of options because, as I said, skies are closed. It's Georgia, Tbilisi, it's Armenia, it's Yerevan, or it's Istanbul. And I have a lot of good friends in all 3 of those places, and none of them wanted to leave.
Right.
That's the thing. None of them wanted to flee, but it was, for a lot of them, it was a question of I have friends whose sole income comes from the West. And now they're completely cut off from all of their Russian savings, which I know is not much now and becoming even less. Although it seems like the ruble has kind of stabilized.
Right. I mean,
not in a good position, but at least it stopped falling.
It stopped sinking like a stone. But
yeah.
Yeah, so that's another weird butterfly effect thing of, one day you're I don't know, graphic designer in, say, Moscow, and the next you're, cut off from Moscow and the West, and you're living in Istanbul. And
exactly.
By the way, they're not that keen about Russia right now, are they? So
Turkey and Russia have always had a very close relationship. It's the #1 vacation spot for Russians. Yeah. So Turkey is kind of tolerating Russians. It's more difficult. It's more difficult in Georgia, because Georgia and Russia had a military conflict not so long ago. And even though, a lot of Georgians live in Moscow, a lot of Russians, even more now, live in Georgia. But still, when it's such an overflow of people, and it's people of a certain generation as well, who kind of bring their own culture and don't really care that much about the culture they're entering, and it's creates a lot of tension.
Yeah. So you don't integrate and you form your own enclave, and then suddenly you're viewed as other and all that stuff. My God. Fucking hell.
Yep. But again, it's nothing compared to what's happening in the Ukraine.
No, of course, the suffering that's going on and the actual front of the war, innocent people being slaughtered day in, day out. I mean, unless right now, let's check, maybe they've signed some kind of peace treaty. You never know. It could have happened. Doesn't look like it. Sorry.
There are reports. I mean, who can you really trust these days, right? There are reports that all of the military action will cease by the end of the month, but they have like a week left.
Yep.
And like, what's the goal here? Like, what are they doing? Why can't you just say, we blew up 10 biolabs, we're coming back home? You didn't even need to have soldiers for that. Like, what is he doing there? what's the end game here?
Is it just Mariupol? Is it creating a land bridge between the Donbass and Crimea, and then that's
Your
enough?
guess is as good as mine.
I don't know. I don't fucking know. It's like I thought something was going to happen when suddenly there were 200,000 troops on the border. I didn't think it was going to be this.
But apparently there are even more troops from NATO awaiting control.
Really.
You know, it's so weird. I remember when Trump was elected president and we were all terrified.
Yeah.
And then I remember the joy when it was Biden. And now you're like, you know what? It was, I don't want to say it wasn't that bad. It was bad for a lot of different reasons. But at least we didn't have this. I mean, there's, you know how these things work. You need to say, look over there all the time so people don't notice how flawed you are. But there's a lot of talk about Biden being senile.
Yeah,
and
it's definitely got some kind of cognitive decline.
Well, yeah.
It's impossible to say that he's not. I mean, then again, Trump was probably senile as well. Do you think it would have happened if Trump had been in charge? I remember I've heard a lot of arguing in the West about like this would have never happened if Trump was in charge. But then again, Trump was saying that he was going to pull out of NATO. And I don't know, I can easily imagine a world in which this had happened. And he was, I think at the very beginning, before the invasion, he was saying it's a beautiful thing that he's doing. I think he was actually saying that, but now it's too costly, I think, for him to say that. I don't know. Is he? What's the view of Trump in Russia? Like, obviously from like you, but also like what you read and what people around you say. Was it like? Sorry, go on.
Well, Jesus, I did not imagine this conversation steering into another hellhole, which is Trump. So again, I'm representative of a very small group of people who are, inclined to Western culture, who have traveled, who are educated, who know languages, who read Western media.
But you love him.
And obviously, he's the best. And we we think he is a joke, a very dangerous joke, a very just horrible. He's just a monster in all kinds of ways. But for some reason, a lot of people, again, who are pro-government, loved him. We were like, he's smarter than everyone now. He's playing everyone. Like, he knows, like, he's being the court jester, because it's a very, very smart tactic. And he's our best friend. And he's actually doing a lot of very, very good things. And by the way, your Obama was terrible, but you don't talk about it because he has such a good public image. But behind the scenes, he did so many terrible things. And you don't talk about it because they don't want you to talk about it. But now they're telling you to hate Trump. And so you hate Trump. You puppet, says the puppet. So, yeah.
Okay.
My own mother was like, you know what? Trump is a really smart man. And I'm like,
And is that what the media line was? The Channel One and all of that? They praising him? Or
I wouldn't say like openly praising him because, excuse me, Russian media praising an American president? What? But it was generally sympathetic.
Right, more so than it's been for basically anyone else.
Uh-huh. Oh, they hated Obama. They hate Biden.
Yeah, of course.
But Russia is still very racist, so that's to be expected, sadly. Homophobic, racist, sexist. And people who were changing it are either jailed, fled, or silenced.
It's a very grim picture.
It's not fun, is it? But I follow the motto of believe in the best, but prepare for the worst.
Yeah. It's probably a good mantra right now. So
I mean,
survive.
And you have to take care of yourself and your family and your mental health, because this is not a time to fall apart.
Well, I think what you're doing is very commendable. You know, taking care of a grandparent and staying there, but also speaking the truth and not, you know, being blown over like a piece of paper, but also trying to hope for the best and believing that is a possible outcome. I think that's commendable and brave.
Well, honestly, what else is there to do? As I said, I always have the option of laying face down and weeping. That's not going to change anything, right? I might feel a little bit better, but I am so very grateful for you giving me the opportunity to speak out, because I feel like a lot of Western folk just completely slammed the door in our face.
Yeah, I've seen some of that here, and I think knowing you, knowing Russian people, knowing Russia the country, it's a overly simplistic way of doing things, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help. No. I think we can all agree that we want this situation to get better, and that's not a way to make it better. So thank you so much for giving me your time. This has been a really interesting discussion, and hearing your perspective is, I think, given me a lot to think over, and I just hope that the situation improves for you, for the Ukrainians, for the world, and yeah.
Thank you so much. And I really hope we might get a chance to speak again, maybe in 2 weeks or a month's time, to just see what happens, because honestly, things are so unpredictable right now.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's
hopefully Zoom is still going to be in Russia. Fuck's sake. Hopefully we'll still be allowed to use the internet or computers. Jesus, it's crazy. If you would have told anyone a month ago McDonald's is going to leave Russia, I'm like, what? Here we are.
I know. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll send you a recipe for making your own Big Mac. Trust me, it's quite good. You could do it justice.
Thank you, but I'm vegan.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please give us 5 stars and consider becoming a subscriber, and maybe even supporting us on Patreon. Really helps me continue making this show. If you haven't enjoyed it, then you can fuck off. Many thanks to Nils Hennis-Steer for the amazing music, and to Dave Fox for the cool artwork. Please keep coming back every week for more Bliss of the Abyss.
Message 1.